Could I address the court?
Sure, say whatever you want to say.
Thank you. And, I recall the day I first saw you. I reached out to say I love you, but it was hard to say. I couldn't touch you. So tell me, baby, what were my words? All my tears run together.
Excuse me, Mr. Rollins.
Down the
Mr.
path
Rollins.
you choose
Mr. Rollins.
to follow.
Mr. Rollins.
Tell me, baby, what were my words? All my tears run together. What were my words? All my tears run together, baby, just like rain.
I appreciate that confidence.
What are you doing?
Ron decided that she needed to have a gun for protection. I think she just wants to know that she has some protection. She lives alone in an apartment. She's not staying alone right now, but she lives alone.
Stephanie?
Stephanie. And she just, if she wants one, that's fine with me. I think she's level-headed. She's not going to...
Stephanie, what are you doing here?
Getting a gun for protection in my apartment.
Why? How concerned are you?
I don't know if anything's gonna happen to me, but just in case anybody just happens to come in, I want to have something there. You know, some people who do the same thing. They have a gun for protection, but I never thought I'd have a reason to have one. Now I do.
Let's talk Scream and Danny Rawling. Scream is a 1996 horror film directed by Wes Craven that has impacted the horror genre and completely transformed the slasher genre as we know it. The movie is described as this. Wes Craven reinvented and revitalized the slasher horror genre with this modern horror classic, which manages to be funny, clever, and scary as a Fright Master knife maniac stalks high school students in middle-class suburbia. Craven is happy to provide both tension and self-parody as the body count mounts, but the victims aren't always the ones you'd expect. The movie came after major slashers, such as Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween, and Friday the 13th. While each of these films starred iconic horror slashers, the premise was a little redundant because, well, only so many movies can be made. They featured the same formula: an evil, supernatural-esque villain murders a bunch of young teenagers. Usually, at least one teenager lives to see the next installment in the franchise, and is then murdered in the next one, or becomes the iconic final girl. Scream took the slasher subgenre and flipped it onto its head. The self-aware attitude that the movie took was revolutionary to many horror films that came afterwards. Awareness that the movie was a slasher film is not the only characteristic that made this film stand out. The comedic elements contained in the film also helped to separate it apart from previous slashers. Many horror movies followed in suit with this approach, such as I Know What You Did Last Summer, The Faculty, and Happy Death Day. Looking back on the movie's self-awareness, the movie makes fun of slasher tropes while being a slasher itself.
Oh, now that's in poor taste.
What?
If you were the only suspect in a senseless bloodbath, would you be standing in the horror section?
Well, it was just a misunderstanding. He didn't do anything.
You're such a little lapdog. He's got killer printed all over his forehead.
Okay. Really? Why'd the cops let him go, smart guy?
Because obviously they don't watch enough movies. This is standard horror movie stuff. Prom Night Revisited, man.
Yeah? Why would he want to kill his own girlfriend?
There's always some stupid bullshit reason to kill your girlfriend. That's the beauty of it all. Simplicity. Besides, if it gets too complicated, you lose your target audience.
This created a great comedic undertone for the movie and is really what set it apart from other slashers that came before. Furthermore, this approach proved to be incredibly successful, as so many movies have chosen to do the exact same thing. Take The Faculty, for example. The movie came out in 1998, 2 years after Scream, and has many similarities with it. The Faculty is described as this. To the students at Harrington High, the principal and her posse of teachers have always been a little odd, but lately they've been behaving positively alien. Controlled by otherworldly parasites, The faculty try to infect students one by one. Cheerleader Delilah, football player Stan, drug dealer Zeke, and new girl Mary Beth team up with some of their other classmates to fight back against the invaders. I don't know why this synopsis leaves out Stokely, but yeah, she's a main character too. At first glance, the plot may not seem familiar, but take one look at this movie and you can see just how much inspiration was taken from Scream. The cast of main characters are all teenagers paranoid that aliens have infected their teachers and are trying to kill them now. The movie places a lot of emphasis on its own genre, by having the characters reference alien fiction books to figure out how to survive, much like the references Scream makes to its own subgenre of slashers.
I think something's taking over our school.
Body Snatchers is a story somebody made up, Dingus. It's located in the fiction section of the library.
Yeah, and so is Schindler's List. Look, all fiction is based on some truth, right? Don't you know the rules?
What rules?
You don't... Jesus Christ, you don't know the rules?
Have an aneurysm, why don't you?
There are certain rules that one must abide by in order to successfully survive a horror movie. For instance, number 1, you can never have sex. No. Big no-no! Big no!
I'm a dead man.
Sex equals death, okay? Number 2, you can never drink or do drugs. No, the sin factor. It's a sin. It's an extension of number 1. And number 3, never, ever, ever, under any circumstances say, I'll be right back. Because you won't be back.
I'm getting another beer. You want one?
Yeah, sure.
I'll be right back.
The movie also features scenes where the characters realize that anybody could be infected, so they all cast suspicion on each other and force everyone to do drugs. Yeah, that was an interesting scene. Moving on, this is very similar in the way that the characters in Scream become equally as suspicious of each other.
No, I didn't. Please give me that gun. Give me that gun, guys. No, I didn't.
Of course, just like in Scream, members of the core group and the faculty turn out to be infected and are revealed in a grand plot twist, just like the reveal in Scream. There are many other movies out there that are clearly influenced by Scream, but this is just one of them. With 6 released films in the franchise and a 7th one on the way, the Scream series has transcended multiple decades and inspired a whole new generation of horror. While this film inspired so many other great slasher films, the inspiration behind this film itself is much more sinister. On November 4th, 1989, 55-year-old Tom Grissom, his 24-year-old daughter Julie Grissom, and his 8-year-old grandson Sean were murdered in their home in Shreveport, Louisiana. Julie Grissom's body was found mutilated and then posed. Tape residue was also found on the victim's body, as well as her body was cleaned with vinegar. In the early morning hours of August 24th, 1990, 18-year-old Sonia Larson and 17-year-old Christina Powell were murdered in Gainesville, Florida. Both victims were stabbed to death and their bodies posed in provocative positions. These murders marked the start of the short but horrific killing spree of the Gainesville Ripper. Just one day later, 18-year-old Krista Hoyt was murdered after she returned home and was ambushed by the killer. She was ultimately decapitated, her body posed with her head placed on a shelf, facing her lifeless body. 2 days after that, 23-year-old Tracy Pauls and 23-year-old Manny Taboada were murdered in their apartment, and Paul's body was posed just like the previous victims. In just 3 days, 5 college students were murdered in Gainesville, Florida, dubbing the killer the Gainesville Ripper. In most, if not all instances, the killer broke into the victim's area of residence through the back door using a screwdriver or other tool. All of the victims were similar in the fact that they were young and targeted in their own homes, similar to the ways the victims are targeted in Scream. In November of 1991, Danny Rawling was charged with 5 counts of murder for the Gainesville killings. He pled guilty to all charges in 1994, right before his trial was set to begin. Rawling was ultimately sentenced to death on April 20th, 1994, and executed by lethal injection at Florida State Prison on October 25th, 2006. Scream was written by Kevin Williamson, who was house-sitting for a friend when he got the inspiration for the movie. While house-sitting one day, He saw a TV special on Danny Rawling and was horrified by the crimes. He felt true terror at seeing the destruction that Danny Rawling left in his path. The crimes reminded him of his favorite movie, Halloween. Williamson was terrified by the movie as a child and was inspired to recreate this fear in the form of another horror film. He used the terror that was felt by everyone after the crimes committed by the Gainesville Ripper and created Scream. While the film is a slasher film itself, it references a multitude of other slashers. In the opening scene, the film mentions Halloween, A Nightmare on Elm Street, and Friday the 13th.
What's your favorite scary movie?
I don't know.
You have to have a favorite. What comes to mind?
Halloween. You know, the one with the guy in the white mask who walks around and stalks babysitters?
Yeah.
What's yours?
Guess.
Nightmare on Elm Street.
Is that the one where the guy had knives for fingers?
Yeah, Freddy Krueger.
Freddy, that's right. I like that movie. It was scary.
Wow, well, the first one was, but the rest sucked.
Throughout the movie, slashers are constantly referenced, giving the movie a sense of self-awareness. However, while the film is aware of itself as a slasher, true fear is felt from the terror created by a masked killer. While the film may be heavily inspired by the true events of the Gainesville Ripper, there are many other elements to ensure that it is set apart from the grisly crimes. The film includes humor, movie references, and complex twists to tell a story of a series of crimes committed by a masked killer. Of course, this was much different in real life. Danny Rawling's crimes were incredibly gruesome and depraved. This was a straightforward series of murders that are a stark contrast from the actual events in the film. As for the motives of the killers in the movie, Billy states that his actions are motivated by the fact that his mother abandoned him after his father had an affair with Sydney's mother. Meanwhile, there is no elaborate reason that Danny Rawling committed his crimes and targeted the victims that he did, other than the fact that he had obviously very serious psychological issues, as well as a very traumatic past. He was often abused by his father and subjected to very turbulent early years of development. He was also diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, and paraphilia. Not exactly movie material for a motive. The Gainesville Ripper case sparked fear and panic across the United States. During the 3-day murder spree, after the third victim was killed, the murders had attracted widespread media attention. College students started sleeping together in groups, and even withdrawing from college or transferring to other schools. With the threat of a killer on the loose, many people were terrified that they could have been next. Scream does a great job at showing this paranoia. The movie features Gale Weathers as a news journalist who is first shown on school grounds the day after Casey is killed in the opening scene. Students are shown talking about the murder, and this is further escalated after Sydney gets attacked by Ghostface for the first time. Classes are canceled, and a citywide curfew is put in place as the film's atmosphere really emphasizes the fear of a serial killer on the loose. This is a common theme in film. Filmmakers use real-life events all the time to instill fear in viewers. Many films are based on a true story, or at least inspired by one to convey this fear. Texas Chainsaw Massacre is loosely based on Ed Gein. Silence of the Lambs is based on real investigations that led to the capture of a serial killer, and The Conjuring is based on the real experiences from the real Ed and Lorraine Warren. True crime and horror are incredibly intertwined as true crime creates horror. There is no doubt that people are incredibly fascinated with true crime, and this fascination is seen with horror as well. Scream is a great example of that. The franchise is incredibly successful and continues to grow in popularity with each installment that is released. Ghostface costumes are incredibly prevalent, and many of the lines in the movie are quoted constantly today. They're just too iconic not to. While Scream is just one instance of real horror inspiring a fictional story, more stories are being created based on real-life events. Overall, Scream is a great horror film that is still relevant to this day. It was absolutely invigorating to the slasher genre and great at instilling fear based on real-life events. It leads the viewer to kind of think about the fact that while these events may not have happened exactly as shown on the movie, similar events have happened in real life, and that simple revelation is terrifying. Something so fun in the form of a horror movie can happen in real life is a grim and terrifying reminder that you just never know who may be behind the mask.